about yourself, such as where and when you were born, some about your family and origin, your schooling, and type of work that you have done or currently do.
Okay. I was born in Suffolk, Virginia in 1949. My family my mother was a nurse, my dad sold weekly insurance, which put us somewhere in the bottom of the middle class or the top of the upper underclass, whatever that means. Schooling was high school, college, and seminary. And what I've done all my life is work with kids and sing music in churches and schools and so forth.
As a child, do you recall any adult ever discussing prejudice with you? If so, what were you told?
No, we never discussed prejudice. Everybody knew. It was just kind of, there were black people and there were white people, and we knew where we were, and some were more prejudiced than others, and some of us played together. And this is where I told you this morning when you asked me that I used to get a spanking for playing with the black kids because my street was the last street before the black section started. So the fence behind our house, there was a bunch of black kids and a few white kids, and we all played together.
Sometimes people will tell children one thing but model another. Do you pick up on any unwritten rules from adults in your life about how to interact with those who were different from you?
No, my dad was in insurance, and he worked mostly with black people. And they had a great respect for each other, because I used to go with him on his routes. And he would sit and talk, and we'd look at pictures, and we'd have lemonade. So that's how Dad lived. And my mother was a nurse, and she had interacted with all kinds of people, and she was a little more vocal about who she liked and who she didn't like. Unwritten rules were just societal rules. White people stayed here, and black people stayed there. There were all kinds of things said. But I think it was what I just expected. I just called it normal as I was a child growing up.
Okay. Can you recall one of the first times that you encountered someone who was different from you? What was your reaction?
I encountered children different from me, like I said, where the streets were. Mm-hmm. We played together all the time. And it was always a little odd because somehow we knew we weren't supposed to play together, but we always did. And sometimes we would sit and talk, like in an abandoned house. We would sit in the upstairs at this abandoned house and just talk about why black people and white people don't get along. And as kids, we didn't understand that. We didn't know. And so that's really where. And then, of course, in 1965 was when we had the first two black kids came to my high school. And a friend of mine, Rusty Hunley, and myself decided we were going to be friends with a black boy. There was a black boy and a black girl. And so we just decided we would do that. I don't know why we decided that, but we did. And we stood with him lots of times and stood between him and others lots of times just to make that buffer. And when he'd get in an uncomfortable situation, we'd go rescue him. I don't know why, not because I'm a wonderful human being, but I think I just did that.
Thinking back over your life, can you identify any events that happened on a national or regional level that influenced your thinking about prejudice or about other groups of people in general?
That is a really cool question. We grew up playing cowboys and Indians, and the Indians were always the bad guys, and the cowboys were always the good guys. So there was that underlying, I suppose, prejudice at that point. And somehow we used to run around, you're going to rape our women and steal our children. Well, I'm sure as an 8-year-old I didn't know that. I had to have heard that somewhere about some class of people, but I don't really know who it was or what it would have been. Of course, then I grew up in the 60s, and if you were anywhere remotely a hippie in the 60s, everybody hated you. Nobody trusted you. Long hair was a definite taboo. That was a prejudice that I had. The other prejudice that my oldest daughter is part Japanese. She was our first child, and we adopted her in South Carolina. And my dad grew up coming out of World War II, fought in the Pacific. He was always making comments about the Japs or the terrible toys that made in Japan, or there was this underlying theme that he had problems with Japanese people. And one time when we were riding in the car, he was on one of his speeches, and I just looked at him and said, "Dad, you know, Jessica is part Japanese. Her mother was Japanese." And he looked a little surprised, and he never said anything again after that, to me, not in my presence. So prejudice has been there a long time.
What about personal events that may have influenced your thinking?
Personal events. I don't know about events. It was just the whole culture. I never understood, like I said, playing with other kids, all kinds of different kids. I never really understood how we were differential. And I stood against a lot of things in society that were normals that I was always pushing the envelope. So I suppose in some ways I was a little different from people maybe 10 years, 20 years older than I am. But I can't think of anything particularly. Well, yeah, it would be partially church and partially hanging with the kids when we integrated our high school. Oh, golly, I hadn't even thought about that. When I went to college, I was in college in Mississippi, and right in the middle of all that stuff between 67 and 71, and I did some marching and did some sitting in and did some things like that were, not what white people did. I can remember in Suffolk High School, I'm thinking now just off the bat, the black kids I was telling you about that integrated, they were going to sit in at People's Drugstore. And so I went with them. And evidently one of the policemen knew my dad because he came into People's Drugstore, grabbed me by the arm, threw me out of the store, told me not to come back in. And then they went in and arrested all the black kids. So I do remember that too.
Wow.
So I would have reacted adversely against injustice is what I would have reacted to more than anything else.
What have you told, or what do you plan to tell your children about prejudice if the subject does not have children, or has
That's me, yeah.
no plans to ask them to imagine what they might have told children? Oh, oops.
No problem. I don't really talk about it in our modeling, in our thinking, and in the way my wife and I have lived and brought our 3 kids up and bring our grandchildren up, and the church and kids in the church and all that. Don't really talk about it. We just talk about justice, talk about equality. We talk about everyone being equal in the sight of God. We talk about no difference between any people. You can go to Galatians and find that. That's just how I live and think about it. If the subject comes up, which it has some, because our group here at the church, our youth group is integrated, and it does come up, but we talk about our likenesses, our need to get along, compassion, love, caring. Those are the things that I would talk about.
Do you think that the problem of prejudice in the United States has improved, grown worse, or stayed about the same during our lifetime? How have things changed, or how have they stayed the same?
Okay. I think we have identified more groups of people to be prejudiced against. Like I said, when I was growing up, the issue was black and white. Now we have the LGBT, I can't get it all together. Mm-hmm. We have Muslims, we have terrorists, we have, I think black is still a problem, black, white is still a problem. But we have a whole lot more different people to be prejudiced against now. We have a gun culture because I have to have a gun because they are going to hurt me. If I don't have my gun, then I will be, fear is a big thing. We're quick to point out differences. I mean, the guy over in Chapel Hill shot those 3 Muslim kids. I mean, it's all over. And I don't know whether I'm more aware of it or whether it really is different. I know coming to grow up in the 60s, Martin Luther King with his nonviolent resistance. And that's what I was more or less part of. And then you had the Malcolm X thing, and then people got more violent in both areas. And then I'm working with the high schools. And, you know, there's groups of people on both sides that want to hold that issue high. And other kids that just get along fine, like our kids here at the church, they just seem to get along with each other well. I don't know what their underlying things are, but I don't get any, in our laughing and talking and playing and going, I don't hear any difference or feel any difference there. Right. But there are more things to be prejudiced of and fearful of, I think, and the news media just magnifies it.
So you think it's gotten worse?
That's what I said. I don't know whether it's worse or whether I just didn't know as much about it when I was growing up.
Right.
But there seems to everybody's got it now, and you know, churches are terrible with when you're talking about the gay issue. Churches are terrible. Mm-hmm. We've got a political system that neither side trusts the other side, whatever that is. We've got economic prejudice now. Who's going to be taxed and who's not going to be taxed? We don't want to give those people money because they don't work. I mean, I hear these things all the time. So maybe
you've had the most influence on your views about diversity, family, peers, teachers, the media, religion, or your community?
It would be my peers as I was growing up. And that would be some of the kids who were my peers that I didn't really have as friends. They were the black kids I played with. I didn't understand that. And I had a good group of friends who were associated with justice in high school. And then I had a really influential teacher in college, my choir director, who wasn't teaching black. I will speak up when anybody says anything about Muslims. I will speak up, and I do. And at 65, I don't really care what people think of me, so it really doesn't bother me to speak up against things that trouble me now.
How do you believe that prejudice and discrimination should be handled in the future in the U.S.?
I think we should be more tolerant at this point with our political system and our churches and our societies and wars on terror. I don't really have any answers whatsoever on a global or national basis other than faith. And I have some friends who have come out of Africa. I've got some friends who are Muslims. Not everybody is prejudiced. I think it makes better news when you find the most prejudiced people and throw them on the news. So I don't really know how you're going to solve this problem. You will have to. I won't be around that long. It'll be in your court to handle that issue. And how you think about it and what you think of it is what's going to be the predominant attitude. At this point, we're all fearful. You better get, like I said, you better get your gun. You better stay away. You don't go to this part of town. You don't say things when you're here. You don't, right now we've just got so many things that I don't know how it's going to.
Tell me a little bit about yourself, such as where you were born, some about your family of origin, your schooling, and the type of work that you have done or currently doing.
Okay. I was born in Bristol, Tennessee, and went to school there all through high school. And then came to ETSU college and got a degree in music. Mm-hmm. And then went to seminary in Atlanta at Candler School of Theology at Emory University. And now I'm a pastor, the most wonderful job in the world.
As a child, do you recall any adult ever discussing prejudice with you? If so, what were you told?
I remember the late 60s when the civil rights movement was going on, and my parents were very non-prejudiced, openly and verbally. Sorry, I'm not doing good on the tape. They were very openly. They wanted us to love all people and to be inclusive of all people, except there were times when if there were African American boys, they would tell us to stay away from them because they could potentially hurt us and be dangerous. So that was kind of a mixed message.
Right. Sometimes people will tell children one thing but model another. Do you pick one of any unwritten rules from the adults in your life about how to interact with those who were different from you?
I think, what I just said was one of those things that I heard something different than what they intellectually would tell us to do. But I think all of that combined made me be more aware of diversity and to be inclusive and not make judgments about or just not make judgments about people based on being different from East Tennessee.
Can you recall one of the first times that you encountered someone who was different from you? What was your reaction?
I need to think about that one. I cannot remember. It was always a part of my life that people were different. I guess maybe one of the first experiences I had, which wasn't a racial difference but was a cultural difference, was when I went to seminary. There were quite a few Korean students there, and their culture was so different in terms of their religious culture was really different that they were coming from, but they were studying to be pastors to go back to Korea. And I just so admired that sense of spirit of willingness to do anything to be able to share with the gospel with their people. I know this isn't a religious class, but
that's okay. Thinking back over your life, can you identify any events that happened on a national or regional level that influenced your thinking about prejudice or about other groups of people in general?
Like I said, I can vaguely remember the civil rights movement, and my cousins lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they were bused because of integration in the schools. And our schools were already integrated, and I couldn't understand why they would bus them to another school. And so that was one of the things that influenced me in wanting to just embrace all cultures in our environment, and to be willing even to live in neighborhoods where there was racial and cultural diversity. I wanted my kids to be exposed to that.
What have you told, or what do you plan to tell your children about prejudice?
Of course, my children are grown now, but we didn't talk about it. They just were exposed to all kinds of cultural diversity, and I really don't think they see color. I think that's a new thing for this new young people today, is they don't see color and diversity in the same way that people of my generation and my parents' generation did. And I am so thankful for that. Really, really thankful.
Do you think that the problem of prejudice in the United States has improved, grown worse, or stayed about the same during your lifetime? How have things changed? How have they stayed the same?
I think there still are lots of places where there is a lot of prejudice. And I think we're seeing prejudice, new kinds of prejudice from Christians against Muslims, from Muslims against Christians, from racial prejudice. I think that still does exist. I would like to think that it's better, but I think it's emerged in a more violent hostile kind of way, and that's really bad.
Who do you believe had the most influence on your views about diversity? Family, peers, teachers, the media, religion, or your community?
I think my religion, and of course that was tied in with my family too, because I was raised in the church. But when I went to seminary, I went to Atlanta, and so there was a lot of talk about cultural and racial diversity, and that seminary experience influenced me greatly. I was able to begin to see the world through the eyes of people who were minorities and were often prejudiced against.
What, if anything, do you believe is your responsibility in combating prejudice?
I think it is all of our responsibility to combat prejudice, and I think we have to stand up when we see things that are wrong, and we have to be willing, if we are the people who are the preferred race, who are not being victims of prejudice, then we're the ones who can change it. It is very difficult to change something if you're in the minority and you're the one who is being prejudiced against. So I think it is all our duty to try to change that, and I just think it's really important.
How do you believe that prejudice and discrimination should be handled in the future in the United States?
Well, I think we have to continue to advocate for civil rights for all people, and I think there's some things that haven't worked, but I also think that we need to look at the past and look at the things that have failed, like maybe forced integration of schools. Has that worked? I don't know. I just think we need to keep working on it.